I think everybody joined. So, hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Andrei Stănescu. I'm a senior channel account manager in Renaissance, and I'm delighted to have Jake Mackay and Scott Anderson from BullWall, alongside Connor O'Loughlin from Stacked, here with us today. Um, Jack will start the session and he will explain how organizations like yours can strengthen ransomware defenses by moving beyond the traditional prevention-based tools and why EDR alone isn't enough to fully mitigate the threats. He will be followed up by Scott, who will then demonstrate BullWall's ransomware containment solution in action by stopping 3 ransomware attacks in real time and showing how BullWall integrates seamlessly with your existing security stack. Finally, Connor will share how Stack collaborates with BullWall and Renaissance to deliver comprehensive cybersecurity solutions, maximizing your investment and strengthening your defenses. Just before we get started and I hand it over to Jake, just a few housekeeping things. So this session is fully recorded for those who couldn't make it, and we'll make sure that you will get the link afterwards. All attendees will be muted for now, but feel free to unmute yourself during the Q&A session if you want to join the conversation. And of course, we want this to be as interactive as possible, so please drop any questions in the Q&A box at any time, and we'll try to go through as much as we can at the end. So without further delays, I'll hand it over to Jack.
Thank you, Andre, and thank you everyone for joining the session today. We hope you find it useful. Just by ways of introduction, I'm Jake Mackay. I work here at BullWall. I've been here for 4 years. I wanted my camera on at the beginning just so you could put a face to the name, but I am going to go off camera as I present, so you don't see my face as we're going through the session. Now, I'll just turn my camera off now, but if someone, maybe Andre or Tara, if you can confirm that you can see my screen, and I'm just changing the slide now, and you can see that that's changed.
Yep, all good.
Yeah, all
Fantastic.
good.
Excellent. Thank you so much, both. So, some of you may have heard of us, and some of you likely won't have heard of us. But our name is BullWall, and the first thing I really want to highlight on this slide, other than our name being BullWall, is the word ransomware. Now, as an organisation, we are laser focused on protecting against ransomware. We know there's lots of other forms of malware in the world today, but arguably ransomware is the most damaging, it's the most disruptive, it's the most costly form of malware we're seeing in the world today. Arguably, it's probably one of the top cyber threats to any organizations around the world globally, and that's why we've focused on ransomware, because of the impact it can have on an organization's ability to operate. And we are focused on protecting critical infrastructure. We're not focused on devices or endpoints. It's not the true targets of the criminal. No business will ever pay a ransom fee for a device, because ultimately a device going down, potentially through encryption, is not going to impact the operations of your organization. It's when that encryption takes place at critical infrastructure, or whether that's on premise or in the cloud, that's when the true damage is done from a ransomware attack. And that's why we're complementary first. And that's another thing I want to mention. We're not looking at replacing any existing security in the infrastructure. We're actually looking at complementing what you have in place already. So I won't spend too much time on this slide, just kind of the agenda as to what we're going to go through today. We'll be doing introductions in just a moment. We'll be touching on the issue we're seeing with ransomware, why resilience is needed. We'll then touch on our solution called Ransomware Containment. Scott will give you the live demo. We'll touch on our free ransomware assessment test that we can offer you, and then we'll go into the Q&A. So you've already seen me on camera, but here we go. Today you've got myself. I've been at BullWall for 4 years. I'm going to go and be presenting some slides to you and talking through our technology, why it's needed, where it sits in a layered approach to security, and how we can help improve your operational resiliency, and in essence turn a ransomware attack into a mild inconvenience opposed to something far more devastating. Once I've done that, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Scott Anderson. He's a sales engineer here at BullWall, and he'll be taking you through a live technical demo. Now, moving on to the next slide. So you're probably well aware, ransomware has been around for a long time, and it doesn't seem to be going anywhere anytime soon. And we still see so many organizations making the news for being hit by ransomware. And it's really important to understand it's not because they don't have lots of layers of security in place, firewalls, EDRs, maybe privileged access management, cybersecurity training, maybe zero trust. All of these tools and these frameworks do an incredible job. They stop such a high percentage of threats, and you need them in place. But the point is that they can't stop all attacks, and obviously specifically ransomware. And if they could, we wouldn't be hearing about these attacks that take place on a daily basis. Now, the examples you're seeing on the slide at the moment, they're all large, well-known organizations, and it's these types of organizations that make the headline news for that exact reason. And if we look at the costs involved to recover from ransomware for some of these organizations, they're pretty big. But don't be fooled by the fact that it's large organizations that get hit by ransomware. It isn't just large organizations. Close to 60% of ransomware attacks actually get aimed at small and medium-sized businesses. And whilst they don't make the news, it's likely to be far more devastating for those organizations of that size. And let's remember, ransomware is indiscriminate. It targets businesses of all shapes and sizes. We're all reliant on our IT and our critical infrastructure. And that's why the criminals are making a lot of money from these ransomware attacks, and why they continue to increase. Now, what this slide is showing, is since 1990 up to current day, we've added so many layers of security, and you can see that as the slide plays out. Arguably, we've got more security than we've ever had in place before, yet ransomware attacks are still happening. How can that be the case, that we've got more and more layers, yet ransomware attacks are still happening, that they're more devastating than they've ever been before? To us here at Bull, that proves there must be a gap. There has to be a gap, because if there wasn't, why are these attacks continuing to happen? And we believe we fill that gap. And obviously, I'll touch on that as we progress through the session. Now, this slide here, I just want to kind of touch on a few stats. I know these kind of stat slides are not always the most interesting, but they really do, tell a story. Now, if we focus in the top left here, year on year, ransomware attacks have actually dropped ever so slightly in 2024 compared to the previous two, but that doesn't paint the full picture. If we look at the recovery costs from 2022 to 2024, they've nearly doubled. So the average cost to recover from ransomware has nearly doubled. And if we look at the recovery time on the right here, you can see the legend on the right as well as to what each bar represents. If we focus on this section on the left here, as of 2024, only 7% of businesses could actually recover from ransomware attack in less than a day, which means 93% will take anywhere from more than a day to 3 to 6 months to recover. And obviously, the longer it takes you to recover and the longer your organization is down, the higher the cost to recover. The two are obviously interlinked. What's more interesting here is, as you can see, from 22 down to 2024, the speed at which organizations can recover is actually dropping in for this section as well as a week, although we have slightly improved in the latter two here and in the final section on the right here. Now, you probably recognize all of these organizations on the slide, the names in each respective snippet, but let's just focus on the highlighted orange text in each respective snippet of the slide here. Now, all of these organizations are basically saying you shouldn't just focus on prevention. You shouldn't just focus on preventing ransomware, but you really have to focus on the recovery and the resilience once something like ransomware gets in. There's always been that emphasis traditionally on prevention. Build those preventative walls as high as you can and hope you prevent as much ransomware and other threats from getting in and onto your network. But the real challenge comes when the ransomware manages to bypass existing preventative security. And the advice from the likes of the NCSC and other similar organizations is that you have to assume breach. Assume something will get in, and when it does, how resilient is your organization to something like ransomware? Now, what is ransomware resilience? Well, to us here at Bull, firstly, it's the ability to prevent that attack if you can. But most importantly, it's the ability to contain and respond to an active ransomware attack. You need to be sure you can minimize the disruption from ransomware and ensure you can quickly and easily recover any affected data and ensure your business continuity. Operational resiliency is critically important. And if your business cannot operate due to an attack, obviously that's where the big costs to recover come in. Again, going back to the examples I showed on the slide a few moments ago. And what we see with a lot of organizations is there is a big emphasis on prevention-based security. And if you focus and have prevention-only security in place, as a business, you'll have to be 100% effective all of the time across every part of your attack surface against every single known threat. All it takes is for one of these 100% variables to dip to even just 99%, and the criminal can get in and onto the network. It might be something as simple as a missing patch on a device. The point we're making here is you cannot be 100% protected 100% of the time. It really is a matter of when something gets on the network, not if. When something does get in and on the network, happens to be ransomware, you have to be sure you can detect and contain it as quickly as possible, because every second, every minute counts when it comes to ransomware. And that's exactly what we're focusing on here at BullWall. So, a comprehensive resilience strategy, I should say, will cover the prevention, before the attack, the containment, which is during the attack, and the recovery, which is after that cyber attack has taken place. Now, this is key to how organizations can best be protected from ransomware. Now, regarding prevention, you have preventative security measures in place to stop attacks before they occur. It reduces the likelihood of breaches. And through early detection, threats and vulnerabilities, organizations can fix them before they become exploited. Preventing attacks is usually cheaper than dealing with the aftermath, which can involve data recovery, legal fees, reputational damage. In addition, preventative measures reduce the risk of disruptions to operations, which can be costly and damaging to productivity. Now, in the middle, you've got containment. A containment solution is your insurance when that worst happens, when the worst, the worst thing happens. It's the best part of your worst day. With modern ransomware and the ability to encrypt 50,000 files a minute, it's vital you have a solution that can react automatically, shut down that threat in seconds, therefore reducing the footprint of the attack. And containment does just that. It allows your organization to continue to operate as you recover the very small amount of data that gets encrypted, and that's roughly between 10 to 100. Now, regarding recovery, when attacked, recovery is as important as stopping the attack. There's little point stopping the attack if you can't recover from the damage done. Business continuity is one of the most important steps in a resilience plan. And if you have a cybersecurity strategy that's disproportionately focuses on prevention, that's not sustainable and it's ineffective. And we're seeing, again, going back to those examples, if you focus on prevention only and you do get hit by ransomware and don't have containment, the cost to recover could be pretty devastating. So you might be wondering, how do we help organizations improve their ransomware resiliency? Well, traditionally, organizations have relied on a two-step strategy of having, preventative technologies and backup solutions to firstly stop and then recover from attacks. But as we've covered and as we're seeing, preventative technologies, as great as they do, and they do stop a very high percentage of threats, they cannot guarantee to stop all attacks. You have to assume a breach with modern day cyber attacks. And we're recommending to organizations they change this two-step strategy to a three-step to minimize the disruption. Now, steps 1 and 3, they stay exactly as they are. They're no different. The addition is a middle step with containment between that preventative security and your backup solution. And that's what we focus on here at BullWall. We are there to contain active ransomware in that worst case scenario that your existing security has been bypassed and evaded. We are not replacing EDRs or other preventative solutions, and we're not there to replace your backup. Backup's critically important, but it is not the silver bullet when it comes to ransomware, because backup can and often does get targeted by ransomware criminals. And also think about how quickly ransomware encrypts. I mentioned up to 50,000 files per minute. If you don't have 24/7 monitoring in place, an attack begins on a weekend, you may only know about this Monday morning. And by that point, you could have terabytes, petabytes of data. Your entire infrastructure could be encrypted. And it's really not as simple as just clicking restore within the backup solution to get that back. It takes time, it takes effort, and all of that has a cost associated to it. But if you can contain ransomware in seconds and minimize the damage to just 10 to 100 files on average, that will be quick and easy to restore, all the while your infrastructure remains fully operational. And as an organization, you can continue to operate and provide that service to your employees and your customers. So now let's finally talk about our ransomware containment solution. We'll call it RC for short. It does exactly as the name suggests. We are a containment solution. And in a nutshell, RC is a fully automated 24/7 agentless containment solution. It is not trying to stop ransomware getting onto your network, because you've got EDRs, you'll have firewalls, you have other technologies focusing on that preventative role. Instead, we're there to contain active ransomware once the attack's evaded existing security and has begun at your critical infrastructure layer. And again, that's why we're complementary. Remember, we're not replacing anything in the environment. We're just adding a critically important additional layer of security. So what we're looking at here is a simplified network topology. And this slide will give you a really good understanding of where our technology sits in a layered approach. That first layer of protection is always perimeter based. We know the technology is residing at the perimeter. Ultimately, they're there to stop as much nasty stuff from getting to an end user's email, to an end user's device, onto the network. But if anything bypasses that perimeter layer, you've then got your device layer. This is where solutions like XDR, EDR, MDR solutions will reside. But the thing is, as we know, there's lots of moving parts between these two layers that IT teams have to keep on top of. Criminals will look to exploit that. Might be a missing patch on a device, a link being clicked in a phishing email, vulnerability being exploited through an application or an OS. It could be through very clever social engineering or not so clever, or it could be those dreaded zero-day attacks, which are the hardest to stop. Now, outside of your desktops and laptops, you might have other devices that have a connection to the internet. Mobiles, IoT, can be hard to manage and track at times. They will have a connection to the internet. We've seen ransomware attacks start from devices like these. I give the same example in every single session that I speak on. There was a casino that experienced a cyber attack. The criminals got onto their network through a thermometer, an IoT connected thermometer in a fish tank. Just shows you how difficult it can be to stop them getting on your network. Beyond the middle layer here, at the bottom, you've got your data storage, your critical infrastructure. That's the beating heart of any business. And that's the true target of the criminals. And that's exactly where our technology resides. And that's exactly what our technology protects, is the beating heart, the data storage, the critical infrastructure. We are not focused on devices or endpoints because it's not the true target of the criminals. And we don't care how ransomware gets on your network, but all we care about is containing the active ransomware once it has delivered that payload and it's begun the attack in your critical infrastructure. What you'll see is a little ransomware bug come from the top of the screen, bypass the firewall, get onto your network. And as soon as that ransomware delivers that payload and malicious encryption begins, RC reacts, and it does so in seconds. That's because it's detecting on your data. It's looking for the purpose of any ransomware, which is the malicious encryption. RC isn't focused on the ransomware strain, patterns, signatures, behaviors. It looks for the encryption. As soon as it sees that taking place at critical infrastructure layer, RC puts in place fully automated isolation steps that can remove affected users and devices from the network. And those isolation steps means that we've contained that ransomware, which means it cannot spread. Everyone else on the network remains productive, operational, doing their jobs. And most importantly, what RC gives and ensures is business continuity by adding a huge amount of resiliency to your critical infrastructure. On a high level, that's what RC does, but Scott will go into more detail in the demo. Now I'm going to touch on the four-step approach that RC takes to containing active ransomware. I just mentioned it's detecting on data. It's not trying to spot the specific strain of ransomware, the patterns or the behaviors or the signature of it. It needs to detect and see malicious encryption. But as soon as it sees that malicious encryption, it initiates a fully automated 24/7 response that doesn't require any human intervention. How does RC respond? Well, the first thing it will do is kick off isolation steps to contain the active ransomware. It can use our own inbuilt capabilities or integrations into other technologies. Second part of the response will be the alerting, and the same can be said again. We have our own inbuilt capabilities or we can integrate into other technologies. Now, regarding recovery, I've mentioned RC needs to see encryption. So, it does need to see some of your data actually being encrypted before it can react. It's just the nature of the technology. It's not preventative, it is reactive. It's there to contain an active attack. So on average, about 10 to 100 files might well be lost before we contain or encrypted before we contain the attack. But RC knows which of those files were accessed as well as encrypted. It then provides you a recovery list of those 10 to 100 files you may need to restore. You can export that to CSV and you can link that to any backup tools so you can quickly and easily restore that data. 10 to 100 files will be quick and easy to restore. All the while, because we've contained that attack, your infrastructure remains fully operational and your business can continue to operate and provide the service to your employees and your customers. And lastly, reporting, obviously critically important, especially when we think about compliance. And once any attack is contained by RC, a report gets generated for you. And this report will give you a full list of all of the files that got affected, the 10 to 100, owner and location of those, timestamps of when the attack began and when RC detected and contained it. This report could be provided internally to key stakeholders, or this could be used to provide to regulatory authorities. If any of the data's contained that got encrypted contained personal information, it could be considered a data breach, and you'll need to report for that. And this reporting capability we provide makes that process seamless and efficient. And Scott will show an example of that. Now, we are a complementary solution. We've got a two-way RESTful API, which means we can integrate into existing security solutions. And you can see a few examples of our integrations on the slide. We've got 100+ integrations, but you're just seeing a few examples on the slide at the moment. So this is the final slide before we get into the live demo with Scott. And I hope it's become clear we're not just protecting your data, we're protecting your critical infrastructure as well. So that could be things like application service, database service, domain controllers. We're vendor agnostic when it comes to protecting your storage infrastructure. We can protect cloud, things like 365, SharePoint, OneDrive, Team Sites, Google Drive, hosted servers in Azure, AWS, and we can also put a protect your backup infrastructure too. Now, I've done a lot of talking. I'm going to take a breath. I'm going to hand over to Scott now to provide you with the live demo. We look forward to getting your questions at the end of the session. Scott, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Jake. Okay, everyone, just give me a moment while I share my screen, and then I'll be right with you. So what I'm going to do for you is take you through, firstly, a high-level overview of the RC server. So we'll go into some of the setup and some of the configuration. The key thing I want to show you today is 2 live demos. So the first of those demos is actually going to be on this device, and this is a device with a user logged in. So I'm going to be running a ransomware attack against a traditional, so a kind of on-premise file share. You'll see exactly how that unfolds. You'll see the response from RC, and then we'll go through the recovery process. I'll also then take you over to my studio over here, where I can actually show you how we protect data in the cloud. And specifically, I'm going to focus on this machine in the middle, which is our OneDrive and SharePoint demonstration. So we're going to come back to that shortly. For now, though, I'm running RC here just on a single Hyper-V image. So this is just a lightweight Windows virtual server, and that just sits somewhere within your data center. So we actually install 2 servers for you so that you have a primary and a secondary. They share configuration, but one is active and one is passive. So if one stops, the other one kicks in and takes over immediately. They could be hosted on premise, they could be up in the cloud in something like AWS or Azure, but wherever those servers are, they're going to protect everything. So if they are hosted on premise, they'll still protect the data in the cloud and vice versa. So just before we go into any demos, I'm going to take you through a couple of quick pages of configuration. And the first of those is our monitoring zone page. So this is one of the first pages we come to once we've installed RC. And this is where we add the shares, the sites, and the infrastructure that we want to protect from within. So we've got a mixture here of traditional file shares. So that's actually the one I'm going to use for the first demo. That's that file share there. We've also got things like domain controllers, application servers, and database environments in here too, because we can monitor and protect all of that key infrastructure alongside your critical data. We also protect DFS namespaces, and then we have all of the cloud solutions in here as well. So Office 365, SharePoint, OneDrive, Team Sites, and Google Drive are all covered from within RC, and it's a very simple setup as well. So if I show you how we set up for SharePoint, all we actually need to do is add the top level SharePoint tenant. Everything underneath there, each individual line item underneath that top level tenant is then automatically protected. So it's a very simple one-time setup. And then just talking about file shares generally for a moment. So firstly, we only have to give RC read access to your file shares. But the key thing is that it doesn't continually scan your environment. So it doesn't look at all of the files all of the time. Instead, it's monitoring and it's listening for any changes taking place. So in the case of an on-premise traditional file share, it's actually listening out for the SMB message that's being generated as your users are making changes to files and as they're creating new content. The way we detect in the cloud is slightly different, but I'm going to talk about that when we come to do the cloud demonstration very shortly. In either case, though, because RC is just looking for those changes taking place, firstly, it's going to pick up any problems really quickly. Then we don't add any additional network overhead at all because we're purely making use of the traffic that's there already on your network. We're not adding anything. We're not going to slow anything down at all. And then the last page I want to show you before we move into the demo is our checklist page. So there's 2 sides to this. We've got a known bad section over here, first of all, and we keep this up to date. So this is basically a reference library of everything that we know that's out there in the world of ransomware as it exists today. And RC will only use this as a reference. It doesn't need this information. to stop a ransomware attack, because it's not looking for the ransomware strain or signature. It's looking instead for the illegitimate encryption that's taking place on your data. So it's actually looking for the purpose of a ransomware attack, not the actual ransomware itself. So this is purely here as a reference for RC. So it can come in here, it can quickly identify the strain of ransomware that's been used, but of course it's already stopped the attack because it's seen that encryption taking place. And this also means it's ready for any kind of attack as well, whether it is something that we know already, something like Lockbit here, for example, or whether it's something entirely new that we've never seen before. So that 0-day threat that potentially is just around the corner, RC is ready for that in exactly the same way as it's ready for any of these. We've then also got the whitelist over here, which is basically the known goods section. And one of the most important things we do when we come to install RC for you is to learn the types of data that you're using. We do that automatically within the first few weeks. So we install the software, we add the shares that we want to monitor, just as we saw on the previous screen, and then we put RC into an automated machine learning mode. And it's going to stay in that machine learning mode typically for somewhere between 2 to 6 weeks. Now that will vary, so that does depend on the complexity of your network, also on the number of file shares that RC is going to be monitoring, but it is typically somewhere within that ballpark. During that time, there's a couple of points to mention. So firstly, we haven't enabled the kill switch within RC yet. So it is just going to be learning. It won't perform any of the isolation steps that you'll see happening today during the demo, although you will still receive all of the alerts during that time because we would have configured those by now. And then secondly, one of our engineers will check in with you during that process. So a couple of times a week, half an hour at a time, they're going to log on. They're going to make sure that that machine learning process is all going as planned. They can address any alerts, they can do any manual whitelisting that he's doing at that point as well. But whilst RC is in that machine learning phase, it's going to do 3 things. So firstly, it's going to learn your file extensions. So we actually start with this list of 15 file extensions. That will grow as this process continues. Then it will learn the file headers associated with those file extensions. And finally, it will learn any kind of encryption that you're doing. And that's legitimate encryption, of course. So it could be something simple like WinZip or 7-Zip. It could be something more complex like PGP or BitLocker. But RC will learn that. So it knows your good file extensions, it knows your good file headers, and it knows your good encryption. In other words, it's built a baseline of everything you're doing now that's considered to be good. And then anything it sees happening outside of that, it will automatically treat as malicious. So at the end of that period, once we're satisfied that we've captured as much as we can, the alerts have stopped, we're not seeing any more false positives, that's when we would activate the kill switch. So of course, from there, you're fully protected. So let's just go back to the dashboard. And before we move into the first demo, I just want to talk about the live log here for a second. Now, the live log shows you what's happening on your network with regards to file access in real time. So I'm actually generating that traffic at the moment. I've got this little tool here running that's doing that for me. But that's what you'll see once users are logged in and they're working. So they're basically modifying, creating, deleting, and renaming files. As they do so, RC responds to those file event-based notifications. So in other words, it can see that somebody's made a change or that somebody's created something new. And at that point, it will do 2 things very quickly. So firstly, and most importantly, it's going to make sure there is no illegitimate encryption taking place on that file. And to do that, it only needs to take a very quick look at the file header. It doesn't look at the actual file contents. And then it will also work out who the owner of that file is. So in the case where there is a problem, it can highlight to us which user has just made that change. That's a very quick process. And again, all of that information that we're seeing in there is already on your network. So we're not adding anything, we're not slowing anything down at all. So then let's jump over to this device. Now I mentioned that we've got a user logged in. So it's this user here called John Doe. So I'm just going to refresh an Active Directory. And at the moment you can see that account is live. We've also got that file share that I showed you a moment ago. So we're already monitoring that and we're protecting all of these files that are inside of here. What I'm going to do next is run a ransomware attack against that file share. So I'm using our ransomware app here. Now this is actually all real ransomware. And although it's real, it has been re-engineered. It's had any of the damaging capability taken out of it. So it's going to encrypt, but it won't spread. It's just going to stay in one place. Now I'm going to be using DMA Locker for this attack. So DMA Locker is typical of a lot of modern ransomware in as much as it doesn't change the file extension. It just encrypts the file header. So files that have been encrypted with DMA locker will still look as if they do right now. So it's difficult to spot which files have been encrypted and which ones haven't. But we, of course, give you all that information from within RC, and I'll touch on that in a moment. When I do the cloud demo shortly, I'm going to be using Babook Locker, and that will actually change the file extension. So files will change appearance as they get encrypted. But for now, let's carry on with DMA Locker. So when I start this encryption, you're basically going to see a real attack on a real device with a user logged in, and then you're going to see the response from RC. So it's all going to happen very quickly, but you can see based on those files getting encrypted, RC's reached its 100% alert state. We use a scoring system to do that. So each encryption event actually adds up to the score. Once the score gets to 100%, that's when it takes the actions we've told it to take. And in this case, we've told it to shut down the endpoint and also disable the user account. So if I just refresh again now, you can also now see that John Doe's account has been disabled. So it's up to us now when he comes back to the network. Until we enable his account, he's not coming back again. He's having some downtime, but although he is, nobody else is affected by this. Everybody else is working exactly as they were before. And as you can see, we've identified John Doe down here as patient 0. And that was just 2 of the steps that we can take. So currently we've got over 200 different isolation scripts that we can utilize. So there's lots that we can do when it comes to isolation, regardless of what device somebody's on. If it's a Windows laptop or a Mac or a mobile phone or an iPad, it doesn't matter. We can isolate in one way or another. We might not be able to always shut the device down, but we will still kill that connection. So we're going to remove that from the network. We've also got the ability to integrate into your existing security solutions. So if you're using something like Sentinel-1 or Defender, we can actually send an API call from RC to Defender, and then it's Defender that contains the endpoint. Whether it shuts that down, whether it quarantines it, that's of course completely up to you, but this is very, very customizable when it comes to those isolation steps. And we've also identified the server where that encryption took place. We can actually see what went wrong. So in this case, it was mismatched heuristics that caused RC to get to that 100% alert state. And if we go down to the bottom of the event log, so this actually filled up as that attack underwent. So you can see we've got a couple of files encrypted first of all. At that point, it's just a notification. But as more files get encrypted, the alert state goes up. So it goes low, it goes medium, it goes high, and then when it gets to critical, that's when it reached 100%. There will be a small number of files that have been encrypted here. It's typically somewhere between 10 and 100. So it's a very, very small number. And we already know all the information about those files. You can actually see that on each of these encryption events as well. So we've captured the actual file that was encrypted here, and of course the user that started that encryption. But we will give you that in a much more usable format. But the fact is, when we were using a ransomware that was encrypting at 10,000 files per minute, to be looking at sub 100 files that have actually been encrypted, it's a very, very quick response. And RC does need to see some encryption taking place before it can actually stop the attack. That's why there will be a small number of files that have been encrypted. So as far as alerts go, once we start to see these medium level events here on the dashboard, we can push these out in a number of different ways. So we can do that via email first of all. Medium, high, and critical alerts can go to individual email addresses. They can go to distribution groups. We have integration into WhatsApp, into text messaging. We can integrate into any SIEM solutions. We can send alerts to SOC teams. We can automatically generate help desk tickets as well, just like we've done here. The whole idea being you don't need to be sat looking at the dashboard. Wherever you are, whatever time of day or night it is, you're going to get those notifications. But of course, even when you do, you don't need to do anything because all of these isolation steps have been taken automatically. So just before we go over and do the cloud demo, let me go through the recovery process for you very quickly. So this is the attack that we just did a moment ago. And what I can do now, because I know who patient 0 is, I can filter this list, and this will then tell me the actual number of files that got encrypted. So we're actually looking at 39 files here. So we can see them on the screen as well. This is the actual files that got encrypted. To recover those, we make that nice and straightforward. You can actually export that information out to a CSV list, and then you've got everything there you need to recover those files from backups. But if any of these files contain personal information, and this needs to be reported as a breach, all you need to do first of all is just quickly ascertain which ones don't contain personal information. So we can just take those few out, and then we can report on the rest. So this is a fully customizable report. This is in its raw format currently, so we can change the layout of this. We can put your own logo at the top, but it's going to give you all of this key information. So when the attack started and stopped, how many endpoints, how many files affected, who was logged in, what was the IP address, and you've got a breakdown of those files as well. So that's given to you automatically. All you need to fill in manually on this now is the name, the title, the location, and then just a brief summary. So a few sentences, just a quick outline of what's happened. You're going to have that information by now from RC. So the whole recovery process, including this reporting, is really, really quick and simple. So then let me just go through the cloud demo with you. So I've actually got 3 different demos that I can do here. I'm only going to do the one in the middle for today, which is our SharePoint demo. I've got RC running on that little laptop over in the corner there. So it's a separate setup from the one we were on a moment ago. And that's what you can see on the big TV here. So I can actually take you into this device and show you what we've got happening. So first off, we've got Defender running on here. It is just running locally, but as you can see, it's fully up to date. We then also have our OneDrive folder. So if I go down into the bottom level, inside here, we should have a bunch of files. And then just like we did a moment ago, I'm going to run a ransomware attack. So as promised, I'm going to be using Babu Locker. So that's actually going to change the appearance of these files as it encrypts. So I'll get that started and you'll see exactly what I mean. So those files are now getting encrypted. That is all taking place locally at the moment, of course, but in a moment, if I open up OneDrive, you'll actually see those files starting to actually synchronize. So now that those files have been encrypted, if we go down, these will start synchronizing very shortly. There we go. They're on their way already. So they've all been encrypted. Microsoft has recognized that they've changed. It hasn't seen that as any kind of illegitimate encryption. It has just seen it as a change. So they're now going to be winging their way back to our cloud storage repository. So I'm just going to go back to the big screen at this point, and we now need to wait for this replication process to take place before RC can do anything here. That is a Microsoft process, so that's outside of our control. We just need that to happen first before RC can deal with this. But that gives me a little bit of time to explain how we're detecting now. So it's a slightly different process from the one we saw a moment ago, but we utilize webhooks within RC. So I showed you the setup for SharePoint that we just need to add in that top level tenant. What then happens is each individual line item that sits underneath that top level tenant automatically gets one of our webhooks attached to it. And it's that webhook that gives it the visibility to see that we've got these files that are coming into the live log. As they come in, RC does exactly the same checks that it did with the on-prem attack. So it looks into the file header of those files, looks to see if there's any illegitimate encryption taking place. Of course, there would be in this case because all of those files got encrypted and then synchronized, and you saw it go very quickly to 100%. It shut down the endpoint, it's disabled the user. In this case, though, this is the Office 365 user who initiated the upload of those encrypted files. But again, we're not limited to just these actions. There's lots more that we can do regardless of what kind of device somebody is on. So there we go, everyone. That's me done. Thank you so much for taking the time today. I apologise for my voice today. I have got a bit of a cold going on, but I'm very grateful for your time. I'm going to disappear into the dark and I'm going to pass you back over to the rest of the team. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you for that. And thank you for battling through with illness. So thank you. Now, hopefully everyone you found the session useful today. And before we open up for questions, just wanted to make you aware of something we can offer you as a potential next step. Now, if you're keen to understand how resilient your existing infrastructure and security solutions are to active ransomware, we can offer you something called our ransomware assessment test. Now, this is completely free of charge. It will take about 3 hours of time to complete. And what we ask for from you is to set up and complete some prerequisites. They take about half an hour and you'll set up a test share, a test client in preparation for our ransomware assessment test. Now, once you've completed those prerequisites, we will run controlled ransomware attacks within your environment using the ransomware application you saw Scott using in the demo today. So it's safe, it's controlled, it encrypts like real ransomware, but it will not spread because we've removed that the spreading and worming capability. Now, when we run the first 4 controlled attacks, this will be with our solution just monitoring and with all of your usual security technologies running within your environment that we're taking the test on. Now, these first 4 controlled attacks are going to give you a very good understanding as to you know, how does your existing security infrastructure have the ability to contain active ransomware when the encryption is actually taking place in, you know, a test share on your critical infrastructure? We're not focused on the device, we're focused on that critical infrastructure. Once we've run the first 4 control attacks with our technology just monitoring, and we've got a good understanding of how resilient your existing security is to active ransomware, we will rerun those attacks, but this time our technology is fully enabled with all the relevant isolation steps in place. Now, in this session, you'll get a very good understanding as to how resilient your existing security infrastructure is to ransomware, but you'll also see exactly what our solution can offer, the gap that it fills. And if you want to take part in this, please don't hesitate in reaching out to your account manager at Stacked, and we can get that booked in with you. Now, if there's any questions, I'm going to now hand over to the team to throw us any questions that may have come into the chat. But yeah, thank you guys for listening, and let's take those questions if there are any.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Scott. Yes, I do have some questions here. And the first one would be, do you suggest we remove our preventive solutions and just use a BullWall containment solution instead?
No, by no means, absolutely not. Preventative existing technologies, you have to have them in place. They do an incredible job. They stop a very high percentage of threats. We're talking 98% plus usually. But it's in those situations where, you know, they do get bypassed and active ransomware begins at critical infrastructure. You need them in place, but you also need to consider containment, because without containment, once that attack begins, you know, you don't want to fall foul to the costs and potentially, you know, devastating impact that ransomware can have on an organization. Again, if we look at the examples we showed in the slot in the presentation, you know, huge organizations, lots of preventative security, they've still been hit, but you still need them in place because they do stop lots and lots of threats, including ransomware.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Another question would be, some breaches are down to human nature, somebody clicking on the wrong link, and that leads to stolen credentials. How would BullWall solve those problems?
So very much the same in that, you know, yes, once the attack begins, our technology will react instantaneously within seconds, as you saw in the demo. It would contain that active attack. Now, when it comes to stolen credentials, that's a bit of a trickier one, because if they've got your admin credentials and they can move around your network, they can move laterally. In essence, they've got the keys to your kingdom at that point if they've got admin credentials and can move across the network. But we do have an alternative module called Server Intrusion Protection, which can help protect against hijacking of remote access tools like RDP. But we can also monitor the scheduled task manager as well. So hopefully I've answered the question, but we haven't covered that in the session today. But in essence, once an active attack begins, regardless of where the threats come from, our ransomware containment will contain it within seconds. If you're looking at stopping criminals from you know, moving across your network laterally by stealing admin credentials, we have another technology created specifically for that. So I'm hoping that has answered the question. And if there's anything I've missed, Scott, then please jump in and ask away. But if not, then any more questions, let me know, Andre.
Yes, there's another question that came in. So Scott demonstrated how the solution works with OneDrive files, having to replicate to the cloud. How does it work for SharePoint files?
Scott, can I leave that one with you?
Yeah, so it's exactly the same. So whether it's OneDrive, SharePoint, Office 365 or team sites, the process is exactly the same. So just what you saw in the demo, basically.
Okay, thank you, Scott. One other question would be, how does BullWall inform you of the files being encrypted?
So there's multiple different, I mean, Scott, you come off mute. I'll let you answer that. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, you've got the dashboard first of all, which is a nice visual representation of what's going on, but we can alert you in a number of different ways. So we can do that via email, we can do that via SMS, we can do that via WhatsApp, we can integrate into any SIEM solutions, we can send alerts to SOC teams, we can automatically generate help desk tickets as well. So you've got that visibility within your own help desk environment if there is an incident that's taken place. But of course, even when you do get the alerts, RC's already taken care of the isolation step. So it's really just a courtesy to yourselves to let you know there has been some kind of incident, but it's been managed, it's been controlled.
Okay, thank you, Scott. One other question would be around cybersecurity insurance. So having BullWall employed, would that affect the premium of cyber insurance?
So it's a really good question. Now, we can't guarantee that we can reduce cyber insurance premiums, but we've had it. We have done it in the past. We've had customers report to us that we have reduced their cyber insurance premiums anywhere from, 5 to 15%. Given the nature of what we protect, we're protecting the critical infrastructure. We're minimizing that ransomware attack to 10 to 100 files and ensuring the continuity of that business. In essence, we're making that ransomware attack just a minor inconvenience, which means for cyber insurance companies, when they see our technology and what it does, we're not just reducing the customer's risk, but we're reducing theirs as well. Because when it comes to payouts, if we're turning a ransomware attack into 10 to 100 files, the payout from someone like a cyber insurance company is going to be minimal. As I said, we can't guarantee it, but we've had lots of organizations and customers who have said we've reduced their insurance premiums. And we've actually even jumped on calls and demo calls with cyber insurance companies and shown them the technology, and they've seen it and said, yeah, we can reduce those costs. But as I said, just to caveat that, we cannot guarantee it. All cyber insurance companies are different, and so hopefully that's answered your question.
Yes, thank you, Jake. And another question that's also, I think, for you, Jake, is regarding the roadmap and if you have anything planned in the future.
So I'll be honest, at the moment, the one key thing, I'm not too close to the roadmap and what our development team are doing, given my role, but we did launch our server intrusion protection module, and I know they are looking to expand on that and being able to protect other areas of the critical infrastructure. I'm not sure I can really talk about it, so I won't mention it just yet, but we're constantly developing our product, and prime example of that is server intrusion protection. We introduced that as additional feature and functionality to protect the infrastructure that solutions like BullWall is hosted on, or it might be EDR, other technology. We created that off feedback from our customers. So we are constantly changing, constantly evolving, but I do know of some things that are coming up, but I don't know if I can share that just yet. But if we do have any follow-up calls with anyone on the call, that would likely be a better place to potentially share those updates that we might be making and launching very soon, is all I can say with a smile and a wink. We're launching something quite soon, but I don't think I can give information out on that just yet.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Jake. And one last question. I think this one is for you, Connor. And the question is, how does Stack differentiate itself from other managed security providers in the market?
Thanks, Andre. Connor O'Loughlin here, Senior Account Manager here at Stacked. Look, I guess some providers will sell you complex solutions that are hard to manage, but we focus on making security as seamless and as stress-free as possible. We don't just throw tech at the problem. We work with businesses to understand their setup and risks, making sure they have exactly what they need without unnecessary complexity or really cost. Our approach is about keeping business secure, productive, compliant, without the headache. Plus, I guess, because we also specialize in IT, print, and cloud solutions, we understand how security fits into the bigger picture of your business operations. And with a strong local support team, we're always just a call away.
Perfect. And I know this one is a little bit tricky, but Connor, can you just share some of the clients that you're working with, maybe in different industries or verticals?
Yeah, so look, I guess Stacked have about 2,500 customers. We have 6 specialized divisions within Stacked. As I said, I'm the Senior IT Manager here in the IT department, but we have a full audio visual, a managed print services, workplace solutions, branded merchandise, and an AV event production. So we've a vast array of businesses, public and private. I guess for myself, I look after a lot of the engineering and construction space. I work with some very large companies, Jones Engineering, Tauglass, Kirby Group. So we have constant requirements for the likes of BullWall and different security solutions as well. So, I was only speaking recently to a potential customer that actually, didn't safeguard themselves, and they were out of action for up to 4 weeks. So the downtime on that with the massive financial loss. So I think a lot of people are turning, the page now and saying this is a must. It's like putting a pair of socks on in the morning. You need to get yourself protected. And as I said, look, we've a vast array of experience, and we're delighted to work with BullWall and Renaissance to bring this to our customer base.
Thank you, Connor. So I believe that this is the last questions that we have. So we'll just end the session here, and we will make this recording available on demand, and we will follow up with everyone that has participated. Thank you so much.